The top 20 narcissists who fucked up. Part 2. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Let's get on with it. Let's find out who else has royally fucked up. The narcissist that had it all and then threw it all or nearly all away. Number 16. GERALD RATNER. Our next resident of Fucked Upsville is a spectacular example of a narcissist acting with supreme cockiness and also, bizarrely, honesty, which then bent him over and dry-humped him into notoriety. The name may be unfamiliar to some of you, but don't let that put you off this dipstick of the highest degree. GERALD RATNER was born in London to a Jewish family and based his philosophy of business on his experiences as a boy in Petticoat Lane Market. He observed that the people who shouted the loudest and appeared to give the best offers and sold the most were the ones that were most successful, evidently adopting a very sound business strategy, which had undoubtedly would be taught on MBA courses around the world. RATNER joined the family business in 1966 and built up an extremely successful chain of jewelers during the 1980s, of which he was CEO. The shops shocked the formerly staid jewellery industry by displaying fluorescent orange posters, advertising cut-price bargains, and by offering low price ranges. The RATNER's group consisted of RATNERs, H. Samuel, Ernest Jones, Leslie Davis, Watches of Switzerland, and over 1,000 shops in the United States, including Kay Jewelers. His approach was working. The business was extremely successful, and he was enjoying the succulent fruits of that success so much that the juices from those fruits trickled down his entitled chin and pooled around his feet. However, those sticky juices then attracted some flies from Fucked Upsville, and curious as to where they had come from, RATNER decided that rather than continue to embrace a life of privilege, wealth, and success, he would rather be using tea bags 5 times on the trot and living in a tarpaulin covered hole in the ground in Fucked Upsville. Although widely regarded as tacky, the shops and their wares were nevertheless extremely popular with the public, until RATNER made a speech addressing a conference of the Institute of Directors at the Royal Albert Hall on the 23rd of April 1991. During the speech, he commented, "We also do cut glass sherry decanters, complete with 6 glasses on a silver-plated tray that your butler can serve you drinks on, all for £4.95. People say, 'How can you sell this for such a low price?' I say, because it's total crap." He compounded this by going on to remark that one of the sets of earrings was cheaper than a prawn sandwich from Marks and Spencer's, but I have to say the sandwich will probably last longer than the earrings. Well done, Gerald. You've just become a resident of Fucked Upsville. Welcome to your hole in the ground. In the furore that ensued, customers stayed away from RATNER shops. After the speech, the value of the RATNER group plummeted by around £500 million, which very nearly resulted in the group's collapse. RATNER hired a chairman in an attempt to stabilise the situation, and ended up being dismissed by the new company chairman in November 1992. The group changed its name to Signet Group in September 1993. RATNER's speech is famous as an example of someone who decided it was time to go to Fucked Upsville, and an example of the value of branding and image over quality. His gaffes have become so legendary they're often called doing a RATNER. RATNER has said that his remarks were not meant to be taken seriously, demonstrating what a fuckwit he is for opening his mouth in the first place. He blamed what he called aggressiveness and deliberate misinterpretation by several media outlets for the severe consumer reaction. Yeah, you go with that blame-shifting, Gerald. After all, they weren't your words, were they? No, pal, they were your words. Consolidating his residency in Fucked-Upsville, Ratner also admitted, "My first wife left me because I was never at home." What an utter dickwad. Number 15. Boris Johnson. Serial truth stranger and prolific shagger, Boris Johnson needs little introduction as former Mayor of London, former Prime Minister and former MP. Notice a pattern? He's renowned for turning up, doing as he pleases, bamboozling people with a carefully constructed bumbling Boris persona whilst dumping on anyone who gets in his way, and then running off chortling about the mayhem he's created, whilst causing his wife to pump out another kid. Yet for all of the apparent who gives a shit air that Johnson emanates, his fall from grace within the world of politics means that he was on a Boris bike and headed to Fucked-Upsville. Faster than you can breach a lockdown rule, he found himself embracing the cold, cold world of being on the outside. Slumped on a lonely hilltop with just a golfing umbrella for shelter, our tousled-haired chubster was not in the mood for a game of whiff-waff. Scandal pulled up on that Boris bike and said, "Oi, fatty, get on, you're going to Fucked-Upsville." And for once, Boris had to do as he was told, as a consequence of his various fall from grace through the following scandals. In April 2021, his protege, Dominic Cummings, made allegations that Johnson had arranged for donors to secretly pay for renovations on the private residence at 11 Downing Street. Cummings wrote on his blog that the plans were unethical, foolish, possibly illegal, and almost certainly broke the rules on proper disclosure of political donations if conducted in the way he intended. In November 2021, Johnson backed a motion to block the suspension of Owen Paterson, a Conservative MP found to have abused his position by the Independent Standards Commissioner for undertaking paid lobbying on behalf of two companies. Many Conservative MPs refused to support the motion. Not Johnson, of course, and they defied a three-line whip to vote against it. Following the announcement by opposition parties that they would boycott the new committee, and faced with the backlash in the media and from MPs of all parties, Johnson's government reversed its position and announced that a new vote would take place on whether Paterson should be suspended. Paterson then resigned. Following his resignation, in the by-election, there was a 34% swing against the Conservative majority. While speaking in the House of Commons on the 31st of January 2022, Johnson falsely blamed Keir Starmer, the leader of the opposition, for the non-prosecution of serial sex offender Jimmy Savile, when Starmer was Director of Public Prosecutions in the Crown Prosecution Service. Starmer was DPP in the years immediately prior to Savile's death, but there is no evidence at all that he was involved in the decision to not have him prosecuted. Johnson received criticism for the comment, and his policy advisor said that Johnson had made a scurrilous accusation against Starmer. In the Partygate scandal, it was found that multiple parties had been held at 10 Downing Street during national COVID-19 lockdowns, and COVID-19 social distancing laws were breached by 83 individuals, including Boris Johnson, who in April 2022 was issued with a fixed penalty notice. The publishing of the Sue Gray report in May 2022 and a widespread sense of dissatisfaction led in June 2022 to a vote of confidence in his leadership among Conservative MPs, which he won. In July 2022, revelations over his appointment of Chris Pincher as Deputy Chief Whip, while knowing of allegations of sexual misconduct against him, led to a mass resignation of members of the government, and to Johnson announcing his resignation as Prime Minister. In January 2023, a poll found 63% of voters did not want Johnson to return as Prime Minister. For an individual who believed himself to be so popular, this was a real kick in the nuts. In May 2023, Johnson was referred to the police by the Cabinet Office regarding previously unknown potential breaches of COVID regulations that occurred between June 2020 and May 2021, to which Johnson's office issued a statement criticising the unfounded suggestions, which has all the hallmarks of yet another politically motivated stitch-up. Blame shifting, ahoy. Johnson then decided to stop relying on legal advice from government lawyers and went to look for independent legal advice. The same day, after receiving a confidential report from a committee of the House of Commons that was looking into whether he had lied to Parliament over lockdown-breaking parties, Johnson announced his resignation as MP. Here was a man who'd gone from getting Brexit done and, in the 2019 election, won 43% of the vote and a parliamentary landslide majority of 80 seats, its biggest since 1987 under Margaret Thatcher. He was the doyen of his party, who thrived on being MP and Prime Minister, who relished his appearances on television and in the House of Commons, and decided instead that it was all going to be thrown away as a consequence of not obeying the rules and doing what he wanted, which ended up with him being consigned to the political wilderness of Fucked-Upsville. Number 14, Prince Andrew. What an utter buffoon this man is, and a deserved resident in Fucked-Upsville. He has been on Easy Street all his life, running around, chasing women, earning himself the title Randy Andy, pissing about looking cool, flying in helicopters in the Falklands War and not sweating, living in posh castles and palaces, jumping in whirlybirds to travel short journeys, not doing any proper work as people iron his clothes, cook his food, clean his house, tell him where to be, and he gets to take the piss out of people on a regular basis whilst looking at Fergie's freckly bangers. Supposed favourite son of the late Queen Elizabeth, he always got an extra jammy Dodger biscuit ahead of Chuck, Anne and Ted. What a life of Riley this freeloading royal had. He must surely have laughed his not inconsiderable bollocks off as he got into bed at night with his 72 teddy bears. But where is he now? That's right, living in a bush shelter on Tosser Road in Fucked-Upsville, not allowed to play dress-up anymore, stripped of certain titles and banished from all the good stuff as his brother gets to be king, and he can't even go with a begging bowl to his dead pedo mate Epstein. Life was once so easy and sweet for Prince Andrew, but look at him now. Following allegations of dodgy sexual behaviour towards two women, one involving a spitting image puppet, and an absolute car crash of a television interview on Newsnight, it all started to go Pete Tong for Prince Andrew. On the 20th of November 2019, a statement from Buckingham Palace announced that Andrew was suspending his public duties for the foreseeable future. Other working royals took over his commitments in the short term. 24th of November 2019, the palace confirmed that Andrew was to step down from all 230 of his patronages. On the 16th of January 2020, it was reported that the Home Office was recommending a major downgrade of security for Andrew, which would put an end to his round-the-clock armed police protection. Spencer Cuvin, who represented 9 of Epstein's victims, said Andrew could be arrested if he ever returns to the United States. In March 2020, Prince Andrew hired crisis management expert Mark Gallagher. In April 2020, it was reported that the Duke of York Young Champions Trophy wouldn't be played anymore, after all activities carried out by the Prince Andrew Charitable Trust were stopped. In May 2020, it was announced that Andrew would permanently resign from all public roles over his Epstein ties. In June 2020, it became known that Andrew was a person of interest in a criminal investigation in the United States. Following the arrest of Ghislaine Maxwell in July 2020, Andrew cancelled a planned trip to Spain, reportedly due to fears that he might be arrested and extradited to the United States. In August 2020, anti-child trafficking protesters chanting "paedophile, paedophile," referencing Prince Andrew, gathered outside Buckingham Palace, and videos of the protest went viral. In early 2021, there were at least 2 trespassing incidents reported at his Windsor property as a consequence of people trying to find out that dude who now lives in Fucked-Upsville. And in December, he was verbally abused by a woman who was driving, saying, "Get off the road and get back to Fucked-Upsville, you dirty bastard." In January 2022, Andrew's social media accounts were deleted. His page on the royal family's website was rewritten in the past tense, and his military affiliations and patronage were removed to put an emphasis on his departure from public life. He also stopped using the style His Royal Highness, although it wasn't formally removed. In the same month, York Racecourse announced that it would rename the Duke of York Stakes, and Prince Andrew High School in Nova Scotia, which had announced 2 years earlier that it was considering a name change, stated that it would have a new name at the next academic year. In February 2022, Belfast City Council and the Northern Ireland Assembly decided not to fly a Union flag for Andrew's birthday. In the same month, the Mid and East Antrim Borough Council announced that they would hold a debate in June 2022 regarding a motion to rename Prince Andrew Way as Prince Pedo Way. On 27th of April 2022, York City Council unanimously voted to remove Andrew's Freedom of the City. He was the first person to ever have their freedom removed. In June 2022, Andrew took part in private aspects of the Garter Day ceremony, including lunch and investiture of new members, but he was excluded from the public procession following an intervention by his brother Charles, saying, "We don't want people seeing this sex case, okay?" In June 2022, Rachel Maskell MP introduced the Removal of Titles Private Members Bill in the House of Commons, explaining that 80% of the York citizens want Andrew to lose all connection with their city. The bill is due to get its second reading on the 24th of March. Following the death of Queen Elizabeth, Andrew appeared in civilian clothing at various ceremonial events. As he walked behind his mother's coffin in a funeral procession in Edinburgh, a 22-year-old man shouted, "Andrew, you're a sick old man!" In November 2022, it was reported that Andrew was set to lose his police protection, as he was no longer expected to carry out public duties in accordance with the King's wishes. In December 2022, the Telegraph reported that Andrew had written to the Home Office and the Metropolitan Police from his new hovel in Fucked-Upsville to complain about the situation. Prince Andrew has not carried out any royal duties since November 2019 because he now resides in Fucked-Upsville. And, having dropped from the public gaze following the Newsnight interview, he's also no longer receiving any taxpayer funding. So all those juicy privileges that he once enjoyed, all gone. Following his suspect affiliations with Epstein and dodgy behaviours of his own, Andrew has found himself steadily losing his privileges, all culminating now with a shitty residence in Fucked-Upsville. Number 13. Sam Bankman-Fried. Cryptocurrency nerd hobbit Sam Bankman-Fried was living the dream. He was ranked the 41st richest American in the Forbes 400 and the 60th richest person in the world by the world's billionaires. His net worth peaked at $26 billion. As of mid-2021, it was reported that he lived in a 5-bedroom penthouse in the Bahamas with approximately 10 roommates. He managed to make himself wealthy and was hanging out with chicks and tech bros. This man was raging hard as he stroked his 2-inch stubber while playing League of Legends. Whilst not at Musk or Bezos levels of wealth, this chap was rolling in it and was able to pull his pud to his supposed mathematical genius whilst buying whatever he wanted. Riding high, he suddenly found that having more money than he knew what to do with was really not cutting it any longer for him, and instead, what he truly craved was the shame and disgust of residing in a public convenience in Fucked-Upsville, with a dead cat wrapped up in a blanket as his best friend, whilst inhaling the heady brew of his own body odour and the droppings of a burrito fiend who lived in the second trap in the public toilets with him. Not for him the convenience and prestige of massive wealth. Oh no, it was time to go down to Fucked-Upsville. Bankman-Fried was the founder and CEO of the cryptocurrency exchange FTX and associated trading firm Alameda Research, both of which experienced a high-profile collapse, resulting in Chapter 11 bankruptcy in late 2012. By November 11, 2012, amid the bankruptcy of FTX, the Bloomberg Billionaires Index considered Bankman-Fried's net worth to have been reduced to a startling attendance at Fucked-Upsville, 0. Before his wealth evaporated, Bankman-Fried was a major donor to US political campaigns, donating openly to Democratic candidates and covertly to Republicans, as well as claiming that he planned to spend around $1 billion in the 2024 US presidential election. He ain't going to be doing that now. On December 12, 2022, Bankman-Fried was arrested in the Bahamas and was subsequently extradited to the United States. An indictment of him before the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York was unsealed on December the 13th, revealing 8 criminal charges for offences, including wire fraud, commodities fraud, securities fraud, money laundering and campaign finance law violations. Bankman-Fried faces up to 115 years in prison if convicted on all 8 counts, and an additional 4 charges were announced in February 2023. On December 22nd, Bankman-Fried was released on a $250 million bond on condition that he resides at his parents' home in California. His bail was revoked on August 11th, 2023, after Judge Kaplan concluded that there was probable cause that the dickwad had attempted to tamper with witnesses at least twice while on bail, demonstrating what an idiot he really is. This dude didn't just get on the express train to Fucked-Upsville, he teleported there instantaneously, with his complete loss of wealth and the likelihood that he's going to become some hairy-ass trucker's bitch in jail, where he will spend the rest of his days as a resident of Fucked-Upsville. 4 more residents of Fucked-Upsville. 4 more narcissists who've completely buggered it up. But who's next? Join me in part 3.